writers and readers, I'm Christy Stratus, and today I'm going to do my very first live book review. I'm really excited to do this. I always post book reviews on Goodreads, but this is going to be my first video one. So what I'm going to review today is Brutal Youth by Anthony Breznican, and I don't know if you've heard of it. It's his debut novel, and he was also interviewed by NPR. So if you haven't heard of him yet, it sounds like he's going to be going places. The first thing I have to say about this book is that on Goodreads I rated it 4 stars. I really enjoyed it, and the one thing I wasn't sure about is whether it is or is not a young adult book. The reason I say that is because I was looking on Amazon and Goodreads and I just could not find if it was listed as young adult. I even looked it up with YA in the title and couldn't find anything. It could go either way. I think that students would really appreciate it, and there are elements that are really important for them, and I definitely think that any adult would appreciate it also. It's written in a way that's great for all ages. So one thing I want to say about this book is that it's a really important book. I think that it should really be read in schools. I think that high schoolers should be reading this. It has a heavy concentration on bullying, the effects of bullying, the consequences of it coming from fellow high schoolers and from adults. And adults includes both teachers and parents. And I think that that's such a prominent thing today. It's getting worse and worse. And while the book takes place in the 90s, the early 90s, the same themes are applicable to today's students. I think that it would be great for teachers to show what could happen, that kids are not alone who are going through this. It's a common occurrence. It's not fair, but it does happen, that, there are different ways of dealing with it. I think that adults should read it because it just shows how much damage you can do to a child by doing something that might make you feel like you're, I don't know, getting back at someone for your youth or whatever it is, but you're really just damaging another person. So I just think it's a very important book in general, and it would be great if they read it in schools. The reason I gave it 4 stars instead of 5 stars is mostly because it was a really well-written book, very enjoyable. But I did find that the prologue didn't really fit the rest of the book, in my opinion. And I know everybody's going to have a different opinion about everything, in any book. But my opinion is that the prologue seemed very out of place compared to the rest of it. In fact, I really didn't enjoy it. It seemed not amateurish, but it seemed like it was written in a completely different mindset. Like the author had one idea when he wrote the prologue and then came back to it a long time later and wrote the rest of the book, or something like that. It just seemed, and I'm not going to give any spoilers, but it seemed like the beginning of the book was really like, oh, adults are just so stupid and they can't handle anything and the kids have to save the day, and it just seemed very, almost like it was written by a young teenager. And the rest of the book was very mature and like totally different. So I almost actually stopped reading it when I read the prologue, because if that was what it was going to be like the whole way through, I wasn't interested. And I almost returned it to the library, but then I just thought, let me just go through the first chapter and see how it is. And I ended up loving it. So I didn't like that. The back of the book is not entirely representative of the whole thing. It does say something about following 3 students' journeys who have to, it does follow 3 students' journeys, it follows more than 3 students' journeys, but 3 students really closely, and they're freshmen coming into high school. But it says that they have to band together to get through this, and that's not entirely true either. It gave me the wrong impression. I got to the second half of the book and said, the back of this book is not true in that respect. It's a pet peeve of mine when a back of the book is not true or just doesn't represent it properly. One of the smaller things I really liked about it is that it's supposed to take place during the very early 90s, and you could tell approximately when it took place. It sounds like maybe in the 80s, early 90s, yeah. The references to the time period are not so huge that they're distracting. I have read plenty of books where the author just talks and talks about the time period unnecessarily, and it's very distracting and pretty boring because it has nothing to do with the story. That didn't happen in this book. It was all relevant, and Breznican just like threw in these little things that really worked and sort of made sure you remembered what time period it was in without distracting from what was going on. So I really liked that and appreciated it. This is another really small thing. This book really reminds me of Bully the video game. I don't know how many people will also feel that way, but for those of you who have played it or watched it, a Let's Play online, it's really reminiscent of everything that, the storyline is not the same as Bully, but there's a lot of like quests that you have to do in Bully, and it's just really reminiscent, and I found that kind of fun to be able to compare a video game and a book. I also felt that the psychological consequences of bullying from both teens and adults was really clear. It was overt. It wasn't something that you had to figure out, which I thought really worked for this book, and that's what also makes it really relevant for students and young people to read who wouldn't necessarily be able to really delve into or have the time or interest to delve into a book and really look at the psychology and figure out where it's coming from and why. It was more overt, but appropriately so. So I did really like that also. For those of you who have seen it on Amazon, I noticed that Amazon said a lot of people who buy this book also buy it with We Were Liars. And I think those two books are completely different. You guys let me know what you think for those of you who have read both, but just because they both have to do with teens, they're really not related at all. I would say We Were Liars is very much more literary. Yes, there are plenty of psychological elements, but it's like a completely different ball game. And Brutal Youth is more situational. It's more teaching you really, really good lessons, exemplifying some behavior that doesn't always get recognized in the correct way, in as brutal a way as it should be. So I think that that's an important book, and We Were Liars is like a straight up literary book. So I do think that they're very different, and someone who really loves We Were Liars, I wouldn't necessarily recommend this to them. They might end up liking it, but they're two totally different things. So that's my opinion of Brutal Youth by Anthony Breznican. If any of you read it, let me know what you thought down below. Did you agree that it was 4 out of 5 stars? Would you rate it higher or lower? Do you think it's similar to We Were Liars? We all have different opinions, and I would love to hear yours, so let me know what you think, and I'll see you soon.